It was a Tuesday afternoon in Cabanatuan City, the kind of humid, languid day that usually lulls you into a sense of peace. I remember the cicadas humming outside, a relentless symphony that blended into the background of our quiet suburban home. My husband Arthur, a man I had shared 3 decades with, 30 years of building a life, raising a son, navigating the ebb and flow of dreams and realities, was typically meticulous about his study. It was his inner sanctum, a fortress of solitude and important papers, a space he guarded with an almost religious fervor. I respected it, never intruding unless invited, a silent pact we'd maintained throughout our marriage. But on this particular day, a rare, almost unbelievable oversight led him to leave his laptop open on his sprawling mahogany desk. The screen was still active, not asleep. An email notification blinked innocently in the corner, a tiny red flag fluttering in my peripheral vision as I walked by, carrying a tray of iced tea for him. The subject line, stark against the white background, seized my breath. Meeting with Mr. Davies, regarding the estate dissolution and your wife's disappearance plan. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The words hit me like a physical blow, a sudden, cold dread seizing my heart and sending a jolt of ice through my veins. Mr. Davies. That name echoed ominously in my mind. He wasn't just Arthur's longtime lawyer. He was his confidant, the man who handled all of Arthur's most sensitive business dealings, the architect of his elaborate real estate empire that stretched across central Luzon. And the phrase wife's disappearance? It wasn't merely unsettling. It was terrifying, a phrase that conjured images far darker than any marital separation. Disappearance? What did that even mean? Was he planning to leave me, to divorce me in some underhanded way? Or was this something far, far more sinister? My hands began to tremble so violently that the ice clinked loudly against the glass. A desperate, primal need for answers overrode any lingering sense of privacy, any decorum I had always prided myself on. My fingers, surprisingly steady despite the internal chaos, hovered over the trackpad and then, with a decisive click, opened the email. The detailed outline that unfolded on the screen confirmed my darkest, most horrifying fears. It wasn't just about a divorce, it was about my vanishing, neatly tied up with chillingly precise legal jargon and intricate financial maneuvers designed to leave me with absolutely nothing. Paragraphs detailed asset transfers, trusts, and clauses that would legally sever every tie I had to our shared life, effectively erasing my existence as his wife and partner. The cold, calculating precision of the plan, the utter lack of humanity in every single clause, was a betrayal that cut deeper than any affair could ever hope to. This wasn't a moment of passion, a lapse in judgment. This was premeditated, cold-blooded. My husband, Arthur, the man who had sworn to protect and cherish me through sickness and health, for richer or poorer, was meticulously orchestrating my erasure, my complete financial and perhaps even personal annihilation. The hum of the cicadas outside seemed to mock me, their ceaseless song, a reminder of a peace I had just discovered, was a cruel illusion. I gripped the edge of the desk, fighting for breath, the world around me tilting on its axis. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The immediate aftermath of that horrifying discovery was a blur of shock, disbelief, and a crushing sense of utter unreality. My carefully constructed world, built on 3 decades of shared dreams, silent compromises, and unwavering trust, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Every memory, every laugh, every quiet moment of companionship we'd shared, now felt tainted, a grotesque lie. Arthur's footsteps echoed in the hallway, approaching the study, each one a hammer blow against my rapidly fracturing composure. I hastily minimized the email, closed the laptop, and pushed the tray of iced tea towards the edge of the desk, my movements stiff and unnatural. He walked in, oblivious to the seismic shift that had just occurred in my universe. A serene smile was on his face, the easygoing expression of a man whose biggest concern was the evening meal. "Ah, just what I needed, sweetheart. What's for dinner?" His normalcy was a grotesque parody, a mask I now saw through with horrifying, crystalline clarity. How could this man, who had just spent hours plotting my downfall, my utter dissolution, sit there and discuss the evening meal as if nothing were amiss, as if the very ground beneath my feet hadn't just given way? A cold, calculating rage began to simmer within me, replacing the initial shock and the suffocating despair. Tears threatened to spill, hot and stinging, but I forced them back, locking them behind an invisible barrier. Crying was a luxury I couldn't afford now. It was a sign of weakness, and I knew, instinctively, that I needed every ounce of strength I possessed. I had to think, to plan, to respond to this unspeakable act of betrayal with the precision and ruthlessness it deserved. The sheer audacity of his scheme fueled a fire in my gut, burning away the pain and replacing it with a steely resolve. He wanted me to disappear with nothing? He wanted to rewrite my existence out of his life and claim everything we had painstakingly built together? A dark, resolute purpose hardened my features, setting my jaw in a determined line. Cool. If he wanted me to vanish, then by God I would. But not in the way he envisioned. I would disappear with his fortune instead. The thought, chilling yet exhilarating, was a potent elixir, stealing my nerves and sharpening my mind. Every single memory of sacrifice, of compromise, of the countless times I had willingly put his needs, his career, his dreams before my own, now coalesced into a bitter resentment that demanded not just justice, but retribution. He had underestimated me, dismissed me as a complacent wife, a mere accessory to his grand life. He was about to learn just how profoundly, how devastatingly wrong he was. The days that followed were a torturous, elaborate charade. I moved through our opulent home in Cabanatuan City like a ghost, observing Arthur with a new, terrifying clarity. Every gentle touch he offered, every casual conversation about his business deals, every shared meal felt like a scene from a macabre play in which I was forced to be the unwitting, yet deeply aware, actress. I feigned normalcy with an Oscar-worthy performance, meticulously preparing his favorite adobo and sinigang, listening with feigned interest to his mundane work stories, all while my mind raced, dissecting his disappearance plan, searching for weaknesses, for opportunities, for the chinks in his arrogant armor. I had always handled our household finances, a trust he had blindly bestowed upon me, believing me to be incapable of anything more than balancing a checkbook or paying the bills. He saw me as a domestic manager, not a financial strategist. That trust, born of his profound arrogance and condescension, would be his ultimate undoing. The silence of the night, once a comfort, became my accomplice as I plotted my counter-strategy. My accounting background, once a quiet passion I had set aside to support Arthur's escalating career, now became my most potent weapon. I had worked as a certified public accountant before our son was born, a profession I'd loved for its precision and logic. Now those dormant skills surged to the forefront, honed by years of managing our considerable household finances. I spent late nights hunched over our home computer, the soft glow of the screen illuminating my determined face. I pored over financial statements, scrutinizing every line item of our joint bank accounts, digging deep into his personal and business investment portfolios. Arthur, a highly successful real estate developer, had accumulated a truly substantial fortune, much of it in liquid assets and easily transferable investments, an ocean of wealth that was now my prime target. The sheer volume of his wealth was staggering, a testament to his ambition, and now, my potential leverage. I began with the smaller, less noticeable transfers, almost imperceptible diversions of funds. My fingers danced across the keyboard, executing transactions to newly opened offshore accounts under various, carefully constructed aliases. Each transfer was meticulously planned, disguised as legitimate business expenses, charitable donations to obscure foundations, or even large grocery expenses and home repair costs that, in the context of our affluent lifestyle in Cabanatuan City, wouldn't immediately raise suspicion. These transactions were designed to bypass any immediate red flags from the banks or from Arthur himself, who, to my relief, rarely scrutinized the monthly statements beyond a cursory glance at the bottom line. The process was slow, painstaking, and terrifyingly exhilarating. The adrenaline of each successful transfer was a perverse thrill, a quiet, internal triumph against the man who sought to erase me. I devoured online articles and financial blogs, researching international banking laws, the intricacies of offshore havens, and cutting-edge methods of digital anonymity, becoming a phantom in the complex web of the financial world. Every peso moved was a victory, a reclamation of what I felt was rightfully mine after decades of building his empire alongside him, often in the shadows, my contributions unseen and uncredited. I also began systematically liquidating smaller, less sentimental assets from within our home. Antique jewelry he rarely noticed me wear, inherited from my own family, but sitting unworn in our safe. A collection of vintage watches he had acquired but rarely looked at. These items, easily pawned or sold online through discreet channels, provided immediate liquidity without raising alarms. The cash from these sales was immediately funneled into my growing offshore empire, forming a crucial buffer of readily accessible funds. The family cat, my grandson's beloved feline named Miko, became an unexpected and unwitting accomplice. Its nocturnal wanderings and occasional meows provided the perfect cover for my late-night excursions into Arthur's supposedly impregnable study. While he slept soundly, convinced of my ignorance, I retrieved hidden documents, his detailed investment reports, copies of his will, even letters that hinted at larger, riskier side deals he had kept secret. I meticulously photographed each document with my phone, backed them up to encrypted cloud storage, and then, with immense satisfaction, shredded the originals, leaving no trace. The quiet hum of the portable scanner became the clandestine soundtrack to my secret rebellion. I was no longer just his wife. I was a strategist, a phantom, systematically dismantling the very foundation of his intended new life, brick by financial brick. As my covert operation gained momentum, I could feel the net tightening, not around me, but around Arthur's future. His audacity had given me an unwitting advantage. His own carelessness in leaving his digital breadcrumbs had set me free. Now, I was not merely reacting to his plot. I was actively orchestrating my own vanishing act, one that would leave him utterly bewildered, financially devastated, and legally entangled. My strategy was multi-pronged, extending beyond the mere siphoning of funds. I began to subtly redirect the mail for his investment statements and crucial business communications. Instead of arriving at our grand home in Cabanatuan City, they were now rerouted to a new P.O. box I'd rented under a meticulously crafted fake name, complete with forged identification. It was a small detail, but a crucial one, ensuring that he wouldn't stumble upon any anomalies in his usual mail or financial correspondence. This allowed me to monitor his activities and preempt any potential discovery of my own machinations. One evening, as Arthur was engrossed in a late-night call about a new multi-million peso development deal, his voice booming with confidence, oblivious to the silent storm I was brewing, I seized the opportunity. His personal safe, a relic from his bachelor days tucked away behind a painting in his study, had a combination he'd humorously shared with me years ago, never bothering to change it. Inside, I found not only a significant stash of emergency cash, his rainy day fund, but also several original stock certificates for major corporations and deeds to properties he owned outright, free and clear of mortgages. These were assets he meticulously kept off the main ledgers. His secret stash, as he jokingly called it, meant for a truly rainy day, or, as it chillingly turned out, for his life after my supposed disappearance. I meticulously photographed each document with my phone, creating high-resolution digital copies, then carefully replaced them, ensuring no sign of disturbance. The knowledge of these hidden, highly liquid assets would be invaluable, a trump card I held against his grand scheme. My days continued as a delicate, agonizing dance. I maintained the facade of the devoted, somewhat naive wife. I offered unsolicited back rubs as he worked late, brought him his favorite strong kapeng barako, listened with feigned interest to his endless self-congratulatory work stories, all while my mind raced, methodically calculating, plotting his financial demise. He was so utterly consumed by his own grand machinations, so blinded by his own arrogance and perceived intellectual superiority, that he never noticed the subtle shifts in my demeanor, the calculating glint in my eye, or the faint, almost imperceptible, triumphant smile I occasionally suppressed when his back was turned. His supreme confidence was a thick, impenetrable shield, protecting him from the chilling reality of his impending downfall, a shield that was about to be shattered from within. The first minor glitch, a ripple in my carefully orchestrated plan, occurred approximately 2 months into my operation. A bank, one of his smaller, less frequently used accounts, flagged a slightly larger than usual transfer. It was a relatively small amount in the grand scheme of his vast wealth, but enough to trigger an automated alert due to its unusual nature. Arthur received a call from his bank, inquiring about the transaction. My heart pounded like a drum against my ribs as I overheard his end of the conversation, pretending to be busy in the kitchen, casually wiping down countertops. He brushed it off with a dismissive wave of his hand, attributing it to a minor accounting error by his new, inexperienced secretary, or perhaps a delayed payment from a difficult client. The bank seemed satisfied, their automated system appeased. But it was a stark, jarring reminder of the perilous tightrope I was walking, the razor-thin margin for error. I had to be even more careful, more precise, more invisible. This wasn't just a game. It was my survival, my dignity, my entire future hanging in the balance. The stakes couldn't have been higher. The closer Arthur's planned disappearance date loomed, a date I knew from his detailed email, the bolder, yet simultaneously more meticulous, I became. His lawyer's outline had specified a timeline, hinting at a period when Arthur would be out of the country, providing the perfect window for the quote, final stages of his plot. I intended to be well ahead of his schedule, not just financially but geographically. The biggest challenge remained: moving a substantial portion of his liquid assets without triggering the kind of immediate, undeniable alarms he couldn't easily explain away or attribute to a quote, clerical error. I decided on a complex, multi-phase approach, utilizing the intricate network of offshore accounts and shell corporations I had painstakingly established. My accounting skills, honed over decades and sharpened by this desperate need, were now put to the ultimate test. I scoured his financial records for patterns. Arthur, I discovered, frequently made large, irregular transfers from his numerous business accounts to various personal ones, often to cover luxury purchases, high-stakes investments, or even substantial gifts to certain political figures, all transactions he preferred to keep off the main company ledgers. I used these as a precise template for my own actions. Over the course of a critical 3-week period, I executed several truly massive transfers to various shell corporations I had covertly set up in obscure jurisdictions, mimicking the exact patterns, the fluctuating amounts, and even the seemingly random timings of his own illicit activities. Each transfer was deliberately fragmented across different days and multiple banks, using a cascade of intermediaries, further obscuring the true trail of the funds. The names of the shell corporations were generic, unremarkable, chosen specifically to be untraceable back to me, Global Investments LLC, Pacific Holdings Group, Summit Ventures Inc. The sheer volume and complexity of Arthur's legitimate, and often illegitimate transactions provided the perfect, impenetrable camouflage for my own. It was like hiding a single drop of water in an ocean. I also began to systematically empty our shared safe deposit box, a heavy, imposing metal box at a high-security bank in Cabanatuan City. Arthur rarely visited it, believing its contents to be securely locked away and unchanged. I carefully replaced valuable jewelry and rare coins with cheap, convincing costume replicas I'd bought online. The genuine articles were immediately liquidated through a discreet, high-end pawnbroker in a distant city. The significant cash proceeds funneled into my rapidly growing offshore empire, adding another layer of untraceable wealth. This was my hidden hoard, my true escape fund. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Physically, I started packing in secret, not just clothes or personal items, but documents. Crucial, incriminating documents. Every single financial record that proved Arthur's ownership of his various assets. Every email printout of his chilling disappearance planned for me. Every subtly altered ledger I had found. I scanned them, backed them up to multiple encrypted cloud services, and then, with immense satisfaction, shredded the originals in a high-security cross-cut shredder, ensuring no sign of their existence remained. I rented a small, nondescript storage unit under yet another meticulously crafted alias, filling it with the necessities for my new life. A few changes of comfortable clothes, truly important personal papers, a significant amount of cash for immediate expenses, and a prepaid, untraceable satellite phone for emergencies. It was my emergency bunker, my last-ditch contingency. The final and most audacious step was to transfer the last significant chunk of his funds, just days before his planned event, the date he was supposed to activate his lawyer's disappearance scheme. I waited until he was out of town on a major business trip to Singapore, a period when he was notoriously less vigilant about his local finances, his mind occupied with international deals. I accessed his primary investment portfolio, a multi-million peso behemoth diversified across various stocks, bonds, and international mutual funds, and executed a massive sell order. The sudden liquidation of such a vast portfolio would undoubtedly trigger a frantic cascade of calls to him, alerting him to the unprecedented activity. But by then, the funds would already be moving through the complex, multi-layered web of international accounts, making them incredibly difficult, if not utterly impossible, to trace back to me or to recover in any meaningful way. The plan was flawless, executed with a precision born of desperation, cold fury, and years of overlooked expertise. My farewell would not be a disappearance into nothingness. It would be a strategic escape, leaving him with an empty nest and an even emptier bank account, a truly fitting end to his treacherous scheme. The day arrived. Not the day of my disappearance, as Arthur had meticulously plotted, but the day of his financial implosion. Arthur was due back from his business trip to Singapore late in the afternoon, his mind no doubt buzzing with anticipation for his clean slate, his future free of me and our shared history. I, however, was already a ghost, an echo in the grand home in Cabanatuan City. My single, light bag was packed. My plane ticket to a distant, sun-drenched coastal town in South America secured, and the last of the funds, the absolute final remnants of his accessible fortune, were irrevocably out of his reach, nestled securely in my global network of untraceable accounts. I left the house as I had found it, meticulously clean, every surface polished, every cushion fluffed. It was a perfect, pristine tableau of domestic bliss, designed to deepen the shock of his discovery. Save for one small, deliberate detail. On his pillow, precisely placed and impossible to miss, I laid a single, crisp, freshly ironed shirt, the pristine white one he always wore for his most important business meetings, symbolizing his carefully curated public image. And tucked neatly into its freshly pressed collar was a printed copy of his lawyer's chilling email, the one outlining my intended disappearance, now highlighted in bright, almost mocking fluorescent pink. It was my final, silent message, a memento of our shared, now shattered, history, and a stark, undeniable clue to his very bleak future. As the pre-booked private taxi pulled away from the expansive driveway, leaving the opulent house behind, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced in decades, a sensation akin to shedding an impossibly heavy cloak. It wasn't just the thrill of escape, the adrenaline of a successful operation. It was the profound relief of shedding a colossal burden I hadn't even consciously realized I was carrying: years of quiet resentment, unfulfilled desires, and the constant subtle diminishment of my own spirit. The woman who drove away from that house was not the same woman who had lived within its walls for 30 years. She was a phoenix, rising from the ashes of betrayal, ready to forge a new destiny entirely on her own terms. My flight was deliberately circuitous, a complex series of connections through multiple continents, designed to throw off any immediate or even long-term pursuit. I watched the world pass by beneath me, a kaleidoscope of changing landscapes, each one representing a new beginning, a blank canvas upon which to paint a different life. From the sprawling urban lights of Asia to the snow-capped peaks of Europe, then finally across the vast Atlantic. When I finally landed in a small, vibrant coastal town in South America, a place I had always dreamed of visiting but Arthur had dismissed as too primitive or not prestigious enough, the air felt different. It was warmer, freer, carrying the scent of salt and unfamiliar spices, a tangible breath of new life. The simple act of stepping onto foreign soil, knowing I was utterly untraceable, completely off the grid, was an unparalleled joy, a deeply personal victory. Meanwhile, back in Cabanatuan City, Arthur's carefully constructed world was beginning its spectacular, agonizing unraveling. I imagined his grand arrival, his mind buzzing with anticipated satisfaction for his clean slate, his future free of the burden of his old wife. I pictured the moment he would find the empty safe deposit box, the bizarre, damning email on his pillow, and then, the devastating, soul-crushing realization of his utter financial ruin. The frantic, increasingly desperate calls to his bewildered lawyer, Mr. Davies, to his various banks, the dawning horror in his eyes as he discovered the unimaginable extent of his losses. The financial institutions would be in absolute chaos, unable to pinpoint where the vast sums had gone, the digital trail convoluted and deliberately obscured beyond immediate comprehension, designed to lead them in circles. His disappearance plan, meant for me, had, with brutal irony, become his own. He would find himself financially wiped out, legally entangled in a nightmare of investigations and accusations, and utterly alone, abandoned by the very system he had sought to manipulate. The irony was so sweet, so perfectly tailored, a delicious and enduring revenge. He had wanted me to vanish without a trace, to be erased from existence. Instead, I had made his immense fortune disappear, leaving him to face the agonizing consequences of his own callous ambition and greed. The absolute silence from my phone, which remained untouched for weeks, was the final, triumphant testament to my successful severing of ties. My old life was irrevocably gone, and I had absolutely no intention of ever looking back. The warm, rhythmic waves of the Pacific seemed to whisper my new name, a lullaby of freedom. The ripples of my disappearance, or rather Arthur's spectacular financial collapse, began to reach me through the quiet, consistent hum of the internet and a new, encrypted burner phone I had purchased upon arrival. News articles, initially speculative and filled with vague business jargon, quickly turned sensational, their headlines screaming betrayal and ruin. Prominent developers' assets vanish overnight. Fraud or inside job, screamed one national headline, its digital ink still fresh. Arthur Thorne's real estate empire crumbles amidst unexplained financial catastrophe, declared another, detailing the cascading failures of his various companies and projects across central Luzon. The narrative wasn't about my vanishing, but about his astonishing public downfall. His longtime lawyer, Mr. Davies, was scrambling, his carefully constructed public persona dissolving as he issued vague, increasingly frantic statements about, quote, unforeseen financial irregularities, and a highly sophisticated cyber attack orchestrated by unknown parties. The irony was a delicious, almost palpable punchline, a dark comedy that only I was privy to. I watched it all unfold from a small, vibrant cafe overlooking the azure ocean in my new sanctuary. The aroma of freshly brewed local coffee mingled with the salty tang of the sea air, a stark contrast to the sterile, tension-filled atmosphere I had left behind. The local news channels, even in a different language, were filled with grainy images of Arthur's increasingly frantic face, his once composed, arrogant demeanor replaced by a haggard, bewildered expression that aged him years overnight. He looked like a man drowning in quicksand, clutching desperately at straws, his life's work, his carefully constructed legacy, dissolving before his very eyes. The disappearance he'd planned for me had boomeranged with a devastating, precise force, leaving him adrift in a sea of his own making. I, on the other hand, was not merely surviving. I was thriving, truly flourishing. The warm, constant sun and the invigorating salty air were a profound balm to my soul, washing away decades of quiet resentment, unacknowledged contributions, and the lingering sense of being perpetually underestimated. I bought a small easel and a set of paints, rediscovering a passion for art I'd abandoned nearly 30 years ago to support Arthur's escalating ambitions and manage our household. My canvases were no longer filled with the muted tones of obligation. They burst with vibrant colors, reflecting the profound, exhilarating sense of joy and liberation that permeated my days. I enrolled in local language classes, my rusty Spanish slowly but surely improving, allowing me to engage more deeply with the welcoming community. The locals, unburdened by my past, by the whispers of scandal or the weight of expectations, welcomed me with open arms, and I found a genuine sense of belonging, a profound connection I hadn't realized I craved until I experienced it. My mornings began with invigorating walks along the beach, my afternoons were spent painting or exploring local markets, and my evenings often involved lively conversations and music with my new friends. My son, Ethan, tried to reach me initially, his messages a torrent of emotions, a mix of genuine concern for my well-being, thinly veiled anger at my perceived abandonment of his father, and a growing sense of confusion as the scale of Arthur's public downfall became undeniable. He couldn't grasp the depth of Arthur's original betrayal, still blinded by the idealized image of the successful patriarch he had always admired. I chose not to respond to his early calls and texts, allowing him the space to process his own version of events, to wrestle with the uncomfortable truths that were slowly revealing themselves. There was no explanation I could offer at that initial stage that wouldn't sound self-serving or vindictive to him. My focus was on rebuilding my life, on nurturing my own shattered spirit, not on justifying my actions to those who couldn't comprehend the profound depths of the deceit I had endured. The distance, both geographical and emotional, was a necessary boundary, a crucial protective layer as I healed. Months bled into a year, then another. My new life had taken root, vibrant and flourishing like a tropical garden. I felt lighter, healthier, truly alive for the first time in memory, unburdened by the constant performance of being Arthur's wife. Then, a message appeared on my encrypted phone, not from Ethan directly, but from his wife Sarah. It was urgent, pleading, cutting through the serene hum of my peaceful existence. "Please, just hear him out," her text read. "He's desperate, Mom. Arthur, he's really not doing well. This is tearing Ethan apart too." My first instinct, cold and immediate, was to ignore it. What was Arthur's suffering to me now? His consequences were his own. But something in Sarah's tone, a genuine anguish that resonated even through text, stirred a flicker of my old self, the part that had always sought to soothe and fix, particularly for those I loved, like my son. I hesitated for days, weighing the potential cost of re-engagement against the quiet comfort of my self-imposed solitude. Finally, cautiously, I agreed to a video call, carefully setting up my laptop in a discreet corner of my rented casita, ensuring the lush tropical foliage outside blurred any identifying features. When Ethan's face appeared on the screen, he was a shadow of his former self. The entitled bravado, the slightly arrogant confidence he'd always exuded, was gone, replaced by a raw vulnerability, lines of deep stress etched around his eyes and mouth. He looked exhausted, burdened, like a man carrying an invisible, heavy weight. "Mom," he began, his voice hoarse, cracking slightly. He's lost everything. The houses, the businesses, even his personal car. The bank's foreclosed on almost everything. He's living in a small, cramped, rented apartment now, barely larger than my first studio. They're still investigating him for multiple counts of fraud, though he keeps insisting it wasn't him, that he was the victim of some elaborate scam. He blames you, Mom. He says you stole everything, that you're responsible for his entire downfall. I listened calmly, a neutral, almost impassive expression on my face, allowing him to vent, to articulate his confusion and pain. "And what do you think, Ethan?" I asked, my voice steady, devoid of accusation or anger, a quiet challenge in its simplicity. He hesitated, a long, agonizing pause, running a hand through his thinning hair. I honestly don't know what to think anymore, Mom. I saw the papers for his disappearance plan. Sarah found them when she was helping him sort through his old files. He told us it was just a hypothetical exercise with his lawyer, a way to protect assets if something catastrophic happened to him, a kind of extreme estate planning. But then, after everything vanished, after his world imploded, he swore it was you, that you were the mastermind. He showed us the email you left him, the one with the pink highlighting, as proof of your vengeful act. Did he show you my plan, Ethan? I asked, my voice cutting through his explanation, sharp but not unkind. Or the one he had drawn up for me? The one that systematically detailed how to erase me from his life, to leave me with absolutely nothing, to make me disappear entirely? He fell utterly silent, his eyes wide, startled, as if I had just uttered a foreign language. The connection clicked, the horrifying implications sinking in, transforming his confusion into a dawning, terrible understanding. What are you talking about, Mom? He whispered, disbelief warring with the dawning truth in his voice. I took a deep, fortifying breath, the decision to lay bare the full extent of the betrayal firm in my mind. Ethan, your father had planned to make me disappear. Legally, financially, entirely. He intended to strip me of every asset, every right, every connection to the life we built together, to erase me from his life as cleanly and efficiently as if I'd never existed. That email I left him? It was a cold, calculated copy of his blueprint for my financial and personal ruin. I merely adapted his strategy for my own survival, for my escape. He played a dangerous, treacherous game, and in the end he lost everything because of his own monumental hubris and deceit. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken truths, with decades of concealed manipulation finally brought to light. Ethan's face crumpled, the full weight of the revelation visibly hitting him, stripping away the last vestiges of his illusions about his father. He had chosen to believe his father's victim narrative, unable to fathom the truly cold-heartedness of the man he had admired, the hero he had put on a pedestal. The silence stretched, a vast chasm opened by truth, broken only by the gentle sound of waves outside my window, a stark, tranquil contrast to the storm that was finally raging in his world. It was a painful but ultimately necessary reckoning. Ethan's silence continued, a long, agonizing moment of processing, but it was a silence of dawning, painful realization, not anger directed at me. He was clearly grappling with the seismic shift in his understanding of his father. He finally spoke, his voice laced with disbelief and a deep, raw sadness. He really did that? To you? After all these years? After everything you did for him, for us? The raw pain in his voice was palpable, a stark contrast to the easy dismissal he'd shown me earlier. He wasn't defending Arthur anymore. He was grappling with a profound, personal betrayal not just of me, but of the very image of his father he had cherished, the foundation of his own childhood memories now crumbling before his eyes. Yes, Ethan, I confirmed, my voice steady, devoid of triumph, only a quiet certainty. He did, and I simply responded in kind. I didn't steal anything that wasn't, in part, mine by right, built over decades of shared life, of sacrifice, of countless unseen contributions, and endless, often unacknowledged, support. I merely used his own playbook against him. He wanted me to vanish without a trace, to be erased from existence, and I did, along with the means for his comfortable future. It was about survival, Ethan, and reclaiming what was mine from someone who saw me as utterly disposable. The call ended shortly after that. There were no grand pronouncements, no emotional outbursts, just a quiet, heavy understanding that needed no further words. It was the crucial turning point, the beginning of a different kind of reconciliation with my son, one built not on comforting denials, but on a difficult, undeniable truth. Over the next few months, our conversations became more frequent, more open, shedding the superficiality that had characterized them for years. He told me about Arthur's spiraling legal troubles, The constant, relentless investigations that were uncovering more and more of his dubious dealings, extending far beyond the financial disappearance I had orchestrated. He spoke of Arthur's growing isolation, how former colleagues, business partners, and even longtime friends had quickly distanced themselves, unwilling to be associated with the rapidly unfolding scandal. The once unquestioned respect and influence that Arthur commanded in Cabanatuan City had evaporated, replaced by whispers of fraud, averted gazes, and the cold reality of criminal charges. I also learned that Sarah, Ethan's wife, had become a quiet but immensely powerful advocate for me behind the scenes. She had seen the raw, unvarnished truth of Arthur's character, not just in the damning documents of his plot, but in his increasingly erratic, self-pitying, and accusatory behavior as his world collapsed. Her unwavering compassion had gently, yet firmly, shifted Ethan's perspective, patiently nudging him towards a more empathetic understanding of my actions. It was Sarah who first suggested a physical visit, not to confront Arthur, for that was a battle already lost for him, but to see me, to understand my new life, and perhaps to find some healing for herself as well, given the seismic shift in her husband's family dynamics. She understood the deeper wounds that had driven me, and so, nearly 2 years after I vanished from Cabanatuan City, Ethan and Sarah arrived. Seeing their faces at the small, sun-drenched airport, a mix of apprehension and profound relief, was a surreal moment, a bridge spanning the vast distance that had opened between us. We hugged, a long, tight embrace, a silent acknowledgement of the chasm that had existed, and the fragile yet strong bridge we were now building, brick by painful truth. They stayed for a week, immersing themselves in my new world. They explored the vibrant coastal town, met my new friends, and bore witness to my profound transformation. Ethan saw the vibrant, expressive paintings I now created with such joy, heard my halting but enthusiastic Spanish as I chatted with locals, and most importantly, watched me laugh freely and effortlessly, a sound he hadn't truly heard from me in years, a sound unburdened by obligation or performance. He realized that my disappearance wasn't an act of desperate vengeance, but a profound act of self-preservation and liberation, a fierce reclaiming of a life that had nearly been snuffed out by another's greed. He spent hours listening to me recount the years of subtle undermining, the dismissive attitudes, the way my contributions were consistently undervalued, all masked by Arthur's polished public persona of a successful and benevolent man. He began to understand that his father's charisma and outward success masked a deep-seated self-interest that had overshadowed everything, including his own family. He learned that the empire Arthur had so proudly built wasn't just on his shrewd business acumen, but on the invisible labor, the tireless emotional support, and the countless sacrifices I had made for decades, only to be deemed utterly disposable in his future plans. This realization, bitter as it was a crucial step in Ethan's own growth and our renewed connection. Justman made action. Years truly did fly by in my sun-drenched sanctuary. Each passing season deepened the roots of my new life, weaving me inextricably into the fabric of the community, evolving into something far richer and more fulfilling than I could have ever imagined possible. I found a small, charming art gallery in the town plaza willing to display my paintings, and their vibrant hues and expressive brushstrokes began to draw attention from both curious tourists and deeply appreciative locals alike. My art became not just a hobby, but a tangible, visible expression of my newfound freedom and joy, a testament to the creativity that had been stifled for so long. My Spanish, once halting and rudimentary, was now fluent, allowing me to fully immerse myself in the rhythm and nuances of the culture. I even picked up a charming smattering of the local dialect, further endearing me to the tight-knit community, making me feel truly at home. I became a regular volunteer at an animal shelter, finding profound solace and pure, unadulterated joy in the simple, unconditional act of caring for creatures who offered unwavering love and companionship. A stark and welcome contrast to the conditional, transactional affections I had once known. I spent my days basking in the warmth of the sun and the genuine human connection that surrounded me, a palpable sense of peace replacing the lingering anxieties and unacknowledged burdens of my past life. My relationship with Ethan and Sarah deepened immeasurably, solidifying into a strong, unwavering foundation of honesty, empathy, and mutual respect. They continued to visit often, sometimes with their children, my grandchildren, who reveled in the warm climate and my endless stories of adventure and resilience. I taught them to paint by the ocean, to speak a few words of Spanish, and most importantly, the invaluable lesson of self-worth, the unwavering belief that no one, no matter their perceived power or influence, has the right to diminish your spirit or dictate your value. They saw me not just as Dad's wife or grandma, but as a vibrant, independent woman with her own rich life, her own passions, and a strength forged from overcoming profound adversity. They witnessed firsthand the deep contentment and genuine happiness I had found, and I could tell it profoundly impacted their own life choices, guiding them away from the relentless, often soul-crushing, pursuit of material success that had consumed their father. Their values shifted, priorities realigned, creating a healthier, more balanced perspective. One day, almost 5 years after my departure, Ethan shared the final, definitive news that brought a true sense of ultimate closure. Arthur had been convicted on all counts of fraud and embezzlement, and sentenced to a substantial prison term. The protracted legal battles had utterly exhausted him, financially and emotionally, leaving him utterly bankrupt and completely isolated. He was no longer the imposing figure of my past, the powerful developer of Cabanatuan City, but a broken man, stripped of his power, his prestige, his very identity, and his freedom. There was no sense of triumph in my heart, no jubilation, no schadenfreude, just a profound, quiet sense of closure. The disappearance he had meticulously planned for me had, with an almost cosmic irony and tragedy, ultimately consumed him, a stark and undeniable poetic justice that didn't bring joy, but certainly brought an enduring and deep peace to my soul. I often stood on my veranda, looking out at the endless expanse of the ocean, the setting sun painting the sky in fiery oranges, soft purples and deep tranquil blues that reflected in the calm waters. My life, once rigidly defined by another's ambition and insidious betrayal, was now entirely my own, shaped by my choices, my dreams, and my unwavering spirit. The fortune I had vanished with had given me not just financial independence, a comfortable cushion for my golden years, but the ultimate freedom, the profound liberty to choose my own path, to rediscover the woman I was always meant to be, and to live a life unburdened by the corrosive shadows of the past. Arthur had planned my erasure, meticulously crafting a scenario where I would simply cease to exist in his world, a phantom memory. But instead I had become the architect of my own extraordinary existence, a vibrant, resilient testament to the power of transformation. My story was not just a personal narrative of survival. It was a resounding testament to the fact that even from the most devastating ashes of betrayal, a new, more authentic, and ultimately more beautiful life can always rise, phoenix-like, stronger and brighter than before. As time continued its gentle flow, each passing season deepening the roots of my new life, I often found myself reflecting on the intricate tapestry of events that had led me to this peaceful shore. The woman I was before, confined by societal expectations, a suffocating marriage, and unspoken resentments, felt like a distant acquaintance, almost a character in a book I had read long ago, a faded photograph in a forgotten album. The woman I had become was bolder, more authentic, deeply appreciative of the simple yet profound joys in life. I had learned that true wealth lay not in accumulated assets, the lavish homes, or the prestigious titles, but in autonomy, in an unshakable sense of self-respect, and in the cultivation of genuine, reciprocal human connections. The material comforts I now enjoyed were a means to an end, enabling my freedom, not the definition of my worth. My experience had also fundamentally shaped my perspective on betrayal and forgiveness. I didn't hold on to anger or bitterness. They were too heavy a burden for the vibrant new life I was meticulously building. To cling to resentment would have been to allow Arthur to continue to dictate my emotional state, even from afar. Instead, I found a quiet, profound understanding of the inherent fragility of human nature and the deeply corrosive power of unchecked greed and deceit. Arthur's actions, while devastating and deeply hurtful at the time, had paradoxically become the catalyst for my liberation. He had tried to break me, to diminish me to nothing, to make me less than human in his eyes. But instead, he had unwittingly forged me into something infinitely stronger, something truly unbreakable. That paradoxical outcome brought a sense of powerful completion, not vengeance. I recognized that my greatest victory wasn't just the financial one, but the spiritual and emotional one. I had refused to be defined by his betrayal, choosing instead to define myself by my resilience. I began to actively mentor younger women in my community, particularly those grappling with difficult relationships or navigating unexpected life changes. I shared my story not as a cautionary tale of bitterness or a call for retribution, but as an inspiring example of resilience, resourcefulness, and the courage it takes to reclaim one's narrative, to rewrite your own destiny when someone else tries to plot it for you. I spoke of finding your authentic voice, of truly recognizing your own inherent worth beyond external validation, and of having the unwavering courage to walk away from anything and anyone that fundamentally diminishes your spirit or stifles your growth. My gallery, which started small, blossomed into a vibrant and beloved space for local artists, a dynamic hub of creativity and community that further rooted me deeply in my new home, making me an indispensable part of its fabric. It was a place where stories were shared, art was created, and lives were quietly transformed. The calls from Ethan continued, becoming a regular, comforting presence in my life. Now they were filled with not just updates on his own life and his growing family, but also thoughtful, mature reflections on his father's catastrophic mistakes, seen through a more mature and empathetic lens. He was consciously building a life that was distinctly different from Arthur's, prioritizing ethical business practices, genuine family connections, and emotional well-being over ruthless ambition and material gain. He had seen the ultimate, devastating price of his father's choices, the emptiness that came with endless pursuit of power and wealth at any cost, and it had profoundly and positively altered his own life's path, setting him on a course towards a more meaningful, more balanced existence. He even began to incorporate lessons learned from my journey into his own professional ethics, striving to be the kind of businessman his father never was, emphasizing transparency and integrity. The sun dipped below the horizon, painting the vast sky in fiery oranges, soft purples, and deep, tranquil blues that reflected in the calm waters. I stood on my small veranda, a glass of local wine in hand, the salty breeze carrying the sweet scent of the ocean and tropical flowers, rustling gently through my now silvering hair. The past, with its specific betrayals and heartaches, felt like a faded photograph, an old memory that no longer held the sharp, agonizing edges it once did. It was a part of my story, yes, an integral one, but no longer the defining chapter. The present, however, was vibrant, alive, and brimming with the boundless promise of each new day, each new sunrise, a fresh opportunity to explore, to create, to connect. My life was no longer rigidly defined by the man I had married for decades, nor by the substantial fortune I had strategically reclaimed. It was now definitively defined by the woman I had become, an artist with a burgeoning reputation, a cherished friend, a wise mentor to many, a loving grandmother whose presence brought light to her family, and above all, a resilient survivor who had authored her own extraordinary transformation. I had chosen, with every fiber of my being, to live a life imbued with purpose and joy, rather than linger in the debilitating shadows of resentment, regret, or bitterness. To do so would have been to grant Arthur continued power over me, even from a distance, and that was a victory I would never, ever concede. The disappearance he had meticulously planned for me had, with an almost cosmic irony and profound tragedy, ultimately consumed him, plunging his life into ruin and confinement. But for me, it had become my most profound and empowering act of self-creation. I had left a significant void in his life, undoubtedly a gaping hole where his expected future should have been. But in doing so, I had filled my own life, my own spirit, with a richness, depth, and authenticity I never even knew was possible to attain. I had discovered that freedom wasn't just about escaping a physical space or financial dependence. It was about unshackling the soul, freeing the mind from old narratives, and embracing the boundless possibilities of self-reinvention. I was not just existing in the world, I was truly living, savoring every moment, every sunrise that painted the sky, every conversation with a friend, every stroke of paint on a canvas. The faint echoing whispers of the past, of being dismissed, of being undervalued, of being deemed expendable, had been completely replaced by the beautiful, harmonious symphony of my own vibrant and self-authored existence. My days were filled with the laughter of new friends, the warmth of the sun on my skin, the deep satisfaction of creating art that resonated with others, and the quiet, profound comfort of knowing I was exactly where I was meant to be, fully at peace with my choices. And in that magnificent symphony, played out under the endless, hopeful skies of my new home, there was no longer any room for bitterness, only the melodic and enduring notes of freedom, resilience, self-discovery, and the undeniable, powerful capacity of the human spirit to begin anew, to rise, phoenix-like, from any ashes, stronger and brighter than before. Life continued its beautiful, unhurried pace in my coastal haven. The calendar pages turned, marking seasons of vibrant painting, challenging pottery classes, and perfecting my Spanish to a fluent, almost native level. Ethan and Sarah's visits became a cherished tradition, their children growing taller and more independent with each trip, their joyous laughter echoing through my small, happy home. Arthur, though an occasional topic in news archives or a distant, fleeting mention in legal reports from Cabanatuan City, had fundamentally faded from the immediate landscape of my emotional world. He was a closed chapter, a harsh but invaluable lesson learned, a distant memory that held no more sway over my present. Then, one sun-drenched afternoon, as I was tending to the vibrant bougainvillea spilling in cascades of fuchsia over my veranda railing, a sleek, dark black car pulled up to my modest home. It was an anomaly in our quiet, dusty street, its polished chrome glinting under the tropical sun, drawing curious glances from my neighbors. A man emerged, dressed in a crisp, dark suit that seemed utterly out of place in the humid, relaxed climate. He was tall, with silvering temples and an air of quiet, professional gravity that instantly distinguished him from the casual rhythm of our town. He looked vaguely familiar, a ghost of a face from a past life, but I couldn't immediately place him. My heart gave a tiny, involuntary lurch, a forgotten echo of past anxieties. "Mrs. Thorne?" he asked, his voice low and formal, carrying the distinct, cultivated accent of someone from a more structured urban environment like Manila. "My name is Mr. Ramirez. I was formerly with Mr. Davis's firm. I represent Arthur Thorne." My blood ran cold. The mention of Mr. Davies, the very architect of Arthur's vile disappearance plot against me, sent a fresh, unsettling shiver down my spine. I hadn't heard that name, nor been reminded of that specific betrayal, in years. The calm of my afternoon shattered. I straightened, consciously squaring my shoulders, drawing on the strength I had cultivated. "I am no longer Mrs. Thorne," I corrected him, my voice firm despite the almost imperceptible tremor I felt deep inside. "And I have no business with Arthur Thorne, past or present." Mr. Ramirez offered a polite, almost weary smile, his eyes reflecting a hint of understanding, perhaps even sympathy. "Understood. My apologies. However, I believe this is a matter that might genuinely interest you. Despite your understandable separation, Arthur has specifically requested to see you. He is very ill. He's been diagnosed with a severe, rapidly progressing illness, and his doctors say he doesn't have much time left." Ill. The word hung in the humid air, heavy and incongruous, a stark contrast to the vibrant, healthy life surrounding us. I stared at him, my mind racing through a whirlwind of emotions. Why now, after all these years of silence, of his conviction, of his imprisonment? What could possibly possess Arthur, a man who had tried to erase me from existence, to want to see me again? My first, most primal thought was a trap, another manipulation, a last-ditch effort to extract something from me, even in his final days. "I have nothing to say to him," I stated, turning back to my bougainvillea, meticulously pinching off a faded blossom, hoping he would simply take the hint and leave. But Mr. Ramirez persisted, his tone shifting, becoming less formal, more human, infused with a note of genuine urgency, and perhaps a touch of his own weariness from dealing with Arthur's final decline. "Please, ma'am, he's truly not the man he was. The time in prison, the legal battles, and now his deteriorating health, they've broken him. He's not seeking anything from you, I assure you, beyond perhaps closure. A final word. He says he has something he needs to tell you, something he couldn't articulate before. It's important to him to find some measure of peace before the end." He pulled a crisp, white envelope from his inner jacket pocket. "He also asked me to give you this." He wrote it himself. The envelope was simple, unsealed. My name, my true name, written in a shaky, unfamiliar hand on the front. A letter from Arthur. The idea was absurd, yet undeniably compelling. The past, it seemed, was not quite done with me yet. I took the envelope from Mr. Ramirez, my fingers brushing against the surprisingly thin, almost fragile paper. It felt alien in my hand, a tangible link to a past I had meticulously severed. I didn't open it then, not in front of him. "Thank you, Mr. Ramirez," I said, my voice calmer than I felt. "I will consider his request." He nodded, a flicker of something unreadable, perhaps relief, perhaps understanding, in his eyes, before turning and retreating to his car. The black vehicle soon disappeared down the dusty road, leaving behind only the lingering scent of exhaust and a profound disturbance in the quiet afternoon. I went inside, my mind a whirlwind. The letter sat on my kitchen table, a silent, stark presence. For hours, I avoided it, busying myself with mundane tasks, watering the indoor plants, tidying my painting supplies, even preparing a meal I had no appetite for. My peaceful sanctuary suddenly felt invaded by the ghost of a life I had worked so hard to escape. As dusk settled, painting the sky in soft hues of orange and purple, I finally sat down, picked up the envelope, and slid my finger under the flap. The paper crackled faintly. His handwriting, once so bold and authoritative, was now shaky, almost childlike. "My dearest." No, I don't have the right to call you that anymore. "My dearest, your name, Nadinahi, Folaim Zachawista. I know you never wanted to hear from me again. I wouldn't blame you. What I did was unforgivable. I sit here now, in a place I never imagined, and all I have is time. Time to think, time to remember, and time to regret. Every single day. Chayada. I see now, with a clarity I never possessed, what a fool I was. How utterly blind. I chased a ghost, a vision of power and control, and in doing so, I destroyed something truly precious. You are my anchor, my foundation, the quiet strength that built everything. And I plotted to erase you. The irony is a torment I live with constantly. I made my own fortune disappear, didn't I? And my freedom along with it. They say I don't have much time left. This isn't a plea for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. It's a desperate need for you to know, to truly understand, that I finally see. I see the woman you always were, the strength you always possessed, the quiet dignity I so foolishly took for granted. I see what I lost. And what I lost was more valuable than any empire. Lear Yi, I know you owe me nothing. But if there's a shred of the person I once married, the kind, empathetic soul you once were, I beg you, come. Not for me, but for the sake of laying the past to rest. For me to truly apologize, face to face. It's the last thing I will ever ask of you. Kate. Arthur. Kate. The letter slipped from my fingers. It was raw, stripped bare of the arrogance and manipulation that had defined him. The man who wrote this was broken, facing his end with nothing but regret. My initial defenses, so strong and necessary for survival, began to soften, replaced by a complex mix of emotions. A flicker of the old pain, yes, but also a strange, detached pity for the shell of the man he had become. He wasn't seeking to reclaim anything. He was seeking peace, Miacha. I thought of Ethan, of Sarah, of the healing our relationship had begun. Could I truly close this final door without seeing it through? Without allowing the ultimate truth to be spoken, even if only for his own tormented conscience? It wasn't about him anymore. It was about me, and the completion of my own journey. I had escaped, I had thrived, I had rebuilt. Now, perhaps, it was time to confront the source of my past pain. Not as a victim, but as the strong, independent woman I had become, capable of facing even the ghost of Arthur Thorne. The decision was agonizing, yet ultimately clear. I would go. I would go. The prison visit was arranged through Mr. Ramirez, who met me at the gates. The air was heavy, stagnant, a stark contrast to the fresh sea breeze of my home. The sterile metallic tang of the facility filled my nostrils, pressing down on me. I wore a simple, comfortable dress, my hair tied back, no makeup. Just me, unadorned. I wanted no pretense, no performance. This was not a reunion. It was an ending. He was brought into the sterile visiting room in a wheelchair, frail and noticeably thinner. His once sharp eyes, those eyes that had so carelessly dismissed me, were now clouded, holding a deep, profound weariness. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and his once imposing frame seemed diminished, shrunken within the oversized prison uniform. The successful, charismatic developer of Cabanatuan City was gone. In his place was a shadow, barely recognizable. Our eyes met. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. There was no anger, no accusation in my gaze, only a quiet acknowledgement. He tried to speak, his lips trembling, but no sound came out. He cleared his throat, a weak, raspy sound. "You came," he whispered, his voice barely audible, filled with a fragile disbelief. I didn't think you would." "I read your letter, Arthur," I replied, my voice steady, betraying none of the complex emotions swirling within me. "You said you needed to say something." He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to his clasped hands in his lap. "Yes, I need to say I'm sorry. For everything. For the plot. For the decades I took you for granted. For the blindness. For making you feel so small, so invisible. I see it now. All of it. When I lost everything, when I was truly alone here, that's when I finally saw. You were the real treasure, the real foundation. Not the buildings, not the money, just you." His voice cracked, and a single tear traced a path down his hollowed cheek. I watched him, felt the weight of his words, the raw, unadorned truth in his voice. There was no joy in this moment, only a profound sadness for a life wasted, for a realization that came too late. "It cost you everything to see that, Arthur," I said, my voice soft, almost a whisper. "And it cost me everything I thought I had to escape it. We both paid a heavy price." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine, brimming with a desperate sincerity. "I know, and I deserve it, every bit of it. I couldn't leave this world without saying it. Without you knowing that I finally understand, that I truly regret." His voice trailed off, his energy visibly fading. I stood up, walked to the table, and placed my hand gently, briefly, over his frail, trembling one. "I accept your apology, Arthur," I said, the words coming from a place of peace, not resentment. "I forgive you, not for you, but for me, so I can truly be free." He nodded, a profound, almost peaceful sigh escaping his lips. "Thank you," he murmured, his gaze holding mine, a faint, almost childlike smile touching his lips. "Thank you for everything." I withdrew my hand. This was it, the final curtain. I had come, I had listened, and I had offered the closure he sought, not out of obligation, but from a place of my own strength and desire for complete release. I left the prison with a sense of profound liberation, a lightness that transcended the sterile air and the heavy gates. The visit hadn't been about rekindling a connection or settling a score. It had been about severing the last, invisible threads of resentment, about acknowledging the past without allowing it to define my present or future. Arthur's final, honest apology, stripped bare of his former arrogance, had given me a strange, unexpected peace. He had finally seen, even if it was too late for him, and that was enough. Back in my sun-drenched home, life resumed its beautiful rhythm. The finality of that encounter allowed me to pour even more of my soul into my art. My paintings became bolder, more vibrant, infused with a deeper sense of joy and the profound wisdom gained from my journey. I felt truly unburdened, free in a way I never thought possible. Ethan continued to visit regularly, now bringing his children, my grandchildren, for longer stretches. He told me that Arthur had passed away peacefully in prison a few weeks after my visit. His last days, Ethan said, seemed calmer, less tormented. I believe my visit had given him some measure of peace, a final act of honesty in a life filled with deceit. Ethan also shared that Arthur, in his final conversations with him, had expressed immense regret for how he treated me, and had actually left a small, surprising codicil in his highly diminished will. A simple, heartfelt letter to Ethan and Sarah, acknowledging my true role in his life's early successes, and implicitly admitting his own profound failures. It was a posthumous recognition, a final, quiet testament to the truth. My story, once a personal secret, slowly became an inspiration. I continued to mentor women, not just locally, but through online communities I cautiously engaged with. I spoke not of anger or revenge, but of the inner strength that lies dormant within us, waiting to be unleashed when circumstances demand it. I shared how a profound betrayal could, paradoxically, become the catalyst for the greatest transformation, leading to a life more authentic and fulfilling than one could ever imagine. I emphasized the importance of self-worth, of trusting your instincts, and of knowing when to walk away, even from seemingly insurmountable situations. I had come full circle. From a woman meticulously plotted to, quote, disappear with nothing, I had vanished with a fortune, reclaimed my dignity, and rebuilt a life rich in experiences, genuine connections, and profound personal growth. My story in Cabanatuan City had ended in triumph, not sorrow. My journey was a testament to resilience, a powerful narrative of a woman who, when faced with ultimate betrayal, chose not to break, but to soar. And in doing so, I found a freedom far more valuable than any fortune, the invaluable freedom of my own authentically lived life.